This place had everything that I was looking for in a school, in a college, in a university. It checked off everything on my mega list. It passed the counselor check, it passed the career check, it passed the location check. I mean, it passed my class size recommendations and experience, and just it just felt like it was everything that I needed in a college, at least for the next 4 years. And yet, it ended up not being the right fit for me. All right, so before we get into that topic of what happens when a school checks off everything on your mega list and it's still not a fit, let me just take a moment to briefly introduce myself. My name is Marissa, and I am a student success coach. I work with students and families to help them eliminate the stress from the U.S. college admissions process. I do that by helping students to craft and tell their unique story so that they can stand out from a pool of crowded applicants. I also do that by helping students and families to cultivate a grounded, comprehensive college list that is a reflection of their values and what they are looking for in an institution of higher learning. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, that is what we discuss on this channel, so stick around. Let me get back to our topic of, well, what happens, right? Today, I want to kind of delve into that. What happens when a school meets all of your requirements and yet it still may not be the right fit for you? And so this is going to be more of a story time where I share my experience with my first university, where it was a school that checked everything. It was the place that I was supposed to be. I should have felt, really fortunate to have been admitted into this institution, to have gotten a scholarship to attend this esteemed four-year institution. It was at that time was probably in the top 5 in the nation for my major, which was international relations, and it was in a prime location, located in the U.S. capital of Washington, D.C. So it had the appropriate class sizes that I was looking for, esteemed faculty members, you name it, everything that I wanted in a school that would prepare me for a degree in international relations. This school checked those boxes. And yet, I ended up doing a thing. I ended up transferring after my sophomore year. I ended up making a pivot. I gave it 2 years, right? I gave it 2 solid years. I gave it the freshman year. I said, well, it's my freshman year. It's hard. It's a transition. I'm adjusting to leaving my environment where I grew up in and coming to a new location, a new space, new people. It's a lot. So I kind of gave myself that grace period, even though I was struggling with just feeling settled and building community, and just some of those unspoken things that you can't really quantify how those things would affect your experience in a place. For me, what was happening my freshman year was that this esteemed institution just wasn't passing the vibe check for me as a student. It was one thing to maybe come as a visitor when students weren't really around, but it was another thing now to be an enrolled freshman, to be an 18-year-old freshman, first time leaving the nest and saying, okay, this is where I want to commit the next 4 years of my life. And it was a struggle. It was tough. I navigated, I found my way. I had, there were some great professors that I was able to, really develop great relationships with, and I was able to meet some really, really good friends. But at the same time, I still had this gnawing feeling that this wasn't the place for me for the next 4 years, that being committed to this institution long term. The environment was just not exactly what I needed. What I ended up discovering about myself was that I was somebody that really needed to feel like I was having a college experience. And this school, it really had more like a grad school feel, very working professionals. And for me, that was just a leap too much at 18 to go from high school in the suburbs of Southern California to now the nation's capital with briefcases and suits, and and being around peers that were just ready to take over, in terms of just politically, or in terms of just in public policy and international affairs. As much as I actually really appreciated the major, I just felt like I was not in the right place. I was not in the right environment. And by my sophomore year, I decided that I wanted to transfer and started to take those steps to transfer from this institution, which was wild, right? I made this commitment, and on paper, this school looked great, but it ended up not being the place that I spent for the next 4 years. I ended up transferring back to my home state, attending a completely different school, switched my major because I was like, well, maybe I don't want to study that field right now. Maybe it's something that I will get back to later, and ended up becoming an English major and studying English writing and rhetoric, and attending school, attending Pepperdine University, and really having an amazing experience. I felt like I was in the environment that I needed to be in at that time in my life. The transition from home, I was going to be held accountable in a way, but yet I didn't feel like I had to be, 25 and be ready to make certain decisions the same way that I felt when I was at this other university in our nation's capital. And so it wasn't the end of the world, but obviously that wasn't my original plan. And so what was my takeaway from that experience? Well, here were some things that came from it. Even though I did 2 years at the institution in DC, I ended up meeting some friends that have been some of my lifelong friends, right? They're still a part of my life. I ended up being just set up for some really great experiences and connections that did help me out professionally. But more than professionally, I think the big benefit was that community, because I did end up moving a few years later back to the nation's capital and pursue a graduate education closer to that field, but in a different environment. But I think those 2 years ended up being foundational for me. Even though it wasn't the 4 years that I thought it would be, I think at that time in my life, I only needed those 2 years. And those 2 years ended up being a setup for me to pursue a graduate education and to pursue the things that I was ready to pursue, after having a 4-year degree into my early 20s and as a working professional. So all was not lost. And then I had this incredible college experience that I needed to have in my home state of California at the time, when I attended Pepperdine. And so I ended up just having this really rich experience where I was around people that had different views. I was just around people that challenged me. And I just grew in both environments. And I didn't, and that's the thing about, in the moment, you don't realize it, but the hindsight, being able to reflect back, and you're able to pick up the gems in your experience. So yes, it's true. A school can, check everything off of your list that you create, and still may not be the right fit for you because of what your needs might be when you are an incoming freshman, when you are in that environment, may be different than what was speaking to you at the time of when you were creating that college list. But all is not lost. It can be a really rich and rewarding experience. So as you are in this time of list building and visiting schools, um, yes, all of these things are important, but all is not lost. There will always be a path forward if you are willing to take those steps. And I was really grateful for that path. In that moment at the time, I wasn't. I was worried that I wouldn't stay at the same institution for 4 years, but transferring ended up also being one of the best things for me. And reflecting, having both experiences with both those two institutions that are very different from one another, also ended up being the best thing for me. My undergraduate experience, it was that much richer, that much more rewarding because I went to those two universities. All right, so I will end there. If you liked and anything you heard, make sure that you're liking this video, you're subscribing to this channel anywhere you see this content, and stay tuned. Stay tuned as I unpack the ins and outs of the college admissions process. Until next time.